I was on Reddit lurking the Hotline Miami sub, and I got a message, and its contents left me flabbergasted. The message says that the Russo-American Coalition Conference takes place in Washington, D.C., not in Miami. This completely kills one of my major theories, by the way. Like, completely. For those that don't know, here's a very brief summary of my most popular theory. And I really encourage you to watch that video before this one. But basically, Midnight Animal was a scheme to attract Pardo's co-workers into being killed by Martin. The officers assume they're not in any mortal danger, and that they are simply a part of the film. These police officers are brutally murdered, and their remains are put in acid to hide the evidence. This is meant to significantly weaken the Miami Police Department, and on the one day that the Russian president requested an increase in security for the conference. Since they did that, it made it easier to raid the conference, taking out the Russian and American presidents, and dooming the world. To me, this is the coolest theory on my channel. But if the conference occurs in Washington, this ruins literally everything. So when I heard this, the first thing I did was search if there was a Washington in Florida, all just to salvage this theory. So disheartened, I turned to Hotline Miami 2 and played Apocalypse to see if he was right about the Washington thing. And he was. It was over. Luckily I recorded this scene so I wouldn't have to replay the level every time I wanted to see it. But upon reviewing the footage, I struck gold. Did you see it? I'll reverse it again. December 28th, Miami, Florida. Now tell me, where are we here? Why, right? And why does this scene begin by telling us it's in Miami? Is it possible that Richter and Rosa are on a Miami beach? Rosa? Possibly. Richter? No, obviously not. So what is going on? I've made several guesses about this. The first of which guessing that it was a dream that Rosa had. But then upon replaying Final Cut, I noticed something in a very unconventional way. I was watching through the intro, and when Martin said pause, I paused the scene. And the most amazing thing happened. No, nothing happened. I saw something, but the game didn't actually do anything itself. It just helped me notice something. I noticed this guy. We'll call him DJ Bro. At some point, I quit Final Cut, and eventually found myself playing First Trial. And you'll never guess who I found in this level. DJ Bro. There he is. He's a part of this jury. To me, this was incredibly odd. We know the scene in Final Cut is a dream, and Evan is the only confirmed person to have seen this guy. Also odd is the fact that Evan is in the scene at all, considering it's supposed to be Martin's dream. Not only that, it seems strange that Evan's actions exclusively influences the ending of Hotline Miami in a very noticeable way. A lot of things point to Evan for some reason. And let's consider this. We know Martin is dead well before December 28th. Yet we see Richter watch an interview Martin was in well after we see it as a dream. This should be impossible. Unless this scene is not as straightforward as it seems. You see, unlike every other level in Miami, Hawaiian levels are unique in that they don't show us a neon void, which at times can be very helpful at determining what is real and what isn't. So if this scene is showing us anything other than reality, it's going to be harder to tell. With that said, is this real, or is it something else? Something that most in the community can't seem to figure out is why Rachel, the actor who plays girlfriend in Midnight Animal, is seen in the ending sequence of the game being blown up. That's not saying that she's not an important character to the story, but the other characters were at least playable at some point of the story, whereas she wasn't. Making her inclusion in this ending scene very strange. Why is she the only unplayable character that we see getting nuked? After taking a look at everything in the scene, and knowing it has some connection to the opening scene we see in Final Cut, I realized this. Each one of these characters are people that Evan has personally interacted with or seen. Jacket, on trial. Pardo, a bad friend. Martin and Rachel, on a movie set. Rosa, in her own home. Richter, over the phone. And finally, DJ Bro, in the jury. The only logical conclusion I can draw is that Final Cut's intro and Apocalypse's outro are both part of the same dream. Evan's dream. This is why part of the Final Cut dream is seen in the Apocalypse dream. And you might say, well, Martin in the table sequence says, well, this is another dream, alluding to the fact this had to have been his dream, right? I think that was a red herring. He could have been talking about any kind of dream he's had off screen. Evan had this dream. And if you're not convinced, consider this. I was on Reddit when I scrolled to one of the more interesting posts on the site that I'd seen in a while. Someone asked if it was possible that Richter and the grandfather were related. At first, my mind immediately doubted this, which I said in my response. But just looking at them made it hard to not reconsider. So I finished the thought with saying that it's possible but unlikely since he signed the 50 Blessings pamphlet, which would imply they had a hatred for Russians. Also, his last name is Berg, and grandfather's last name is Lebedev, or however you say that last name. Posted that it's possible that Richter had inherited his mother's last name. Now, unless you've instantly processed the implication of all of that, you have absolutely no idea how huge this would be, assuming it's true. And don't worry, I'll explain why in a second. After this discussion, I moved on to thinking it wasn't of any importance. Who cares if he's Russian? He probably isn't anyway. But then I stumbled upon a discussion as to whether or not the Wildlife comics are canon. Major spoilers for the comics coming up, by the way. Please read them first. They're amazing. I read the interviews about the comics, and they don't directly say it's canon, but I was convinced that they might be helpful and purchased them. The stories are great, and I truly wish there was more because it was so good. It has a unique story, and it's within the same universe. But the best part was that they subtly sneak in details that basically prove a lot of things I've been saying. For example, there's a boy named Peter who is the son of a Russian mafia boss. After a strange introduction to our main character Chris, he explains that he wants nothing to do with this criminal lifestyle. When Chris asks if he tried running away or going to the police, Peter explains that the police brought him home and the Russians have friends everywhere. This proves that police worked with the Russians in Hotline Miami 1. Now this is cool, but the most important part of all, the thing that seals the deal, is this scene in Volume 2. On June 10th, 1989, Chris decided to take Peter under his wing, in an attempt to get him away from the Russian mafia. Turns out 50 Blessings knows what he's doing, and sent an operative to take care of it. One of the operatives asks if they are really after one of their own guys. The man in the lion mask says, "You heard the message. They talked about a rat." Though the other man is unsure, they go after their target. Now the man in the lion mask appears to think that a rat must be one of their own members, that has betrayed them or something. However, in the beginning of this volume, he states that he doesn't really understand these terms at all. On February 24th, 1989, the man in the lion mask, Kurt, is sent to a house, and on the way he talks about the calls he receives that tell him where to go. He says this time it's rats. Last time it was cleaning pools. He wonders why they just don't tell him where to go, saying they're all the same job anyway. Now when he gets there, the house he was sent to was guarded by Russians. This wasn't an operative's house. The rats he was sent to deal with were Russian, showing us that he definitely has a misunderstanding as to what these terms mean to 50 Blessings, as he thinks the rat in June was an operative. They weren't calling about the operative. They were calling about the Russian child, Peter. Rats equal Russian. Now tell me, who comes to mind when you hear the word rat? Yup, our man Richter. Richter is Russian. And if all of this has failed to convince you, consider this one last thing. During the table sequence, once Richter has apologized and Richard has finished speaking to him, a flash turns Richter into a skeleton, and half of his rat mask remains on his head. like a hint for someone desperately trying to prove his theory. He was in fact half rat, or half Russian. Now, what are the implications of all this? During Biker's conversation with the janitors tell us that they're setting up operations all around the country. In fact, Chris and Peter escaped this life of murder and mayhem by going to Britain, which lets them live a peaceful life. Definitely strange, but incredibly useful to know, because this tells us that they couldn't simply move within the US to be completely safe. Yet, Richter does. He moves to Hawaii, our 50th state. Unless it isn't. In 1985, we get to participate in the Soviet-American War while in Hawaii. The colonel complains that they're going to lose this war, and it only takes a year for that to happen once San Francisco is nuked, officially ending the conflict. What if a part of this Russo-American coalition included surrendering Hawaii, as it's clearly somewhat important to Russia in 1985? Since Richter is related to a Russian mobster, they let him in Hawaii, keeping him safe from receiving any further calls or threats from 50 Blessings, allowing him to bring his mother as well if she can make it. Now, if this is true, and Russia is in possession of Hawaii, why would Russia nuke their own territory? Why would they nuke Hawaii if they owned it? They wouldn't. And that's my point. This is a dream Evan has. It's not real. Miami is not gone. It's not over.